So for the next part of our lesson, we're going to be looking at the skills behind the work that we're going to be looking at today. So the main focus is looking at how to identify and explain how meaning is enhanced, so made better through choice of phrases and words. So you might be thinking, well, what does that mean? So this means that it's here to help you spot the examples of ambitious vocabulary and figurative language within the text. This is talking about Arlo, the author. So he's going to help us to look and spot these different examples in the text. Now, when you find them, Arlo helps you to think about why the author made these vocabulary choices and how they give a certain meaning to the text. Okay. So, for example, if an author's decided that they're going to decide that the water in a lake was very still and reflective, we need to have a think about, well, why have they used the word still and reflective? But the important word to look at is the use of the word reflective. Well, what do we know about things that reflect? Well, we know that if we look at ice or we look at some still water or we look at a mirror, there is a reflection that comes back. So we could even consider that reflection of the water could be considered almost like glass, because we know that glass is very still. We also know that it's very shiny and therefore reflective. So sometimes it's considering the effect of the vocabulary that the author uses as to what it's describing. So it's not very common to actually find these types of questions in exam papers, and especially when you come around to do your SATs, you will have some of these questions, but they're not very common. But they do require you to think a lot, and a lot of it is using our inference skills as well to read around the text. So this is where our background knowledge of the story also comes into play. So let's look at some examples of the questions. So here we have a question where we have to find and copy different words that could infer a meaning or an understanding. So look at the paragraph beginning. I had the same feeling of mystery and danger around us. So the question here is looking at the word danger. So we're looking at the vocabulary of why the authors used the word danger. And what the question is asking you to do is to copy 4 different words from the rest of that paragraph that would suggest there is danger. So rather than explaining the danger and being very forefront with its understanding, you have to almost infer meaning from the text and find examples. Now that one's a fairly easy question, but here we have a slightly different question. So they crossed the glassy surface of the lake. So give 2 impressions that this gives you of the water. So this is asking for your opinion as a reader as to what that impression gives you about the water. Okay, so this question requires you to think about the author's choice of words. So why they've used the word glassy. Okay, why has he compared the lake to being a glass surface? Okay, you then need to think about, well, how can we describe glass? We know that it's reflective. We know that it's shiny. We know that it's almost a mirroring effect. So we need to think that, is this exactly what the author is wanting to say about the lake as well? Are they trying to use a comparison of comparing water and the surface of the lake to being like glass and it being reflective? But you can also think about it on another level of being realistic about what glass is. So glass can also be described as hard, but you need to consider that we wouldn't suggest that water would be hard unless we're comparing it to ice. So you have to think a little bit deeper as to what that glass could be inferring. Okay, so that one requires you to think a little bit more about the vocabulary in that question. So here we have a different type of question. So this type of question, where it gives you a little quote and then asks you for an opinion, okay, is asking you about what the author's choice of words implies about the objects they're describing. Okay, so this is where you have to sit there and think about the sentence and imagine a visual image in your mind. What is it that the author is wanting me to imagine in my mind? What's the picture they're trying to create? So in a flash. So what does this tell you about the burning rocks in space? So obviously that would be using your background knowledge of what you might know about space and shooting stars and meteors and rockets. And that thing of, well, something is in a flash. We know that if we describe something as being in a flash, it's very quick, it's very fast, and it moves very quickly. So in your head, you'd sit there and think, well, what kind of image does that put into my mind as the reader? And then we have question 29, like a toy sitting on a glass table. So what does this description suggest about the boat? Okay, so this is going to be almost like a boat sitting on water, but it's like a toy sitting on a glass table. The glass on a toy sitting on a glass table, I'll get my words right in a minute, doesn't move. Okay, so that suggests a sense of stillness and calmness to the water. So you need to think, well, if I can put a toy onto a glass table, it's not going to move. So let's now imagine a boat sitting on some water that's not moving. But then you could think, well, is it not moving because there's no current and there's no wind creating any waves? Or is it sitting on the water because maybe it's stuck in ice? Are we now thinking of a winter scene rather than a summery scene? So it gets you to think about what that author might be wanting you to think about. So we have different sentence stems, that the different types of questions that might ask you to think about the author's choices. So what does this character tell us about, what does this word tell us about the character setting or atmosphere? It could be a question that's looking at a phrase which implies that the character, the setting, the atmosphere is, and then you have to give an opinion. It could be look for the simile or metaphor in the text. How does it add meaning? So you could say that they were describing the boat as being as large as a skyscraper. So it's putting that context into how big something might be. It could be finding, copy an example of personification from the text and why is it used? Well, we know that personification is when we give an object or something a human characteristic. So why has the author decided to do that? What effect does that have on you as the reader? What's the context to the story? How has the author's choice of words created a feeling of? It could be of anger, it could be suspense, could be of anxiousness. So thinking about how the author is making you feel as a reader and what that aim is throughout that story. And why did the author choose this particular verb, adjective, or adverb? Okay, so let's explore some of these questions and have a go at doing one together. And then I'll give you a chance at doing one on your own and then I'll set you off on your activity. Okay, so let's have a look at this question together. Okay, let me move my face so you can see. So look at the paragraph beginning, look for the chain of snow-covered peaks. So that's on the second page in chapter 2. What impression does this give you about the rim of heaven? So we need to have a look at the vocabulary in there. So we've got the idea of snow-covered peaks. Now, if we think back to our geography lessons we're looking at and your general knowledge of things that might be covered in snow, we're going to be thinking that this is going to be somewhere either potentially in the very top of the northern or some southern hemisphere, because we're heading towards the north and the south poles. We might be further away from the equator, so it's cold. It could even be that we're thinking, well, if it's snow-covered peaks, we know that peaks tend to be at the top of hills or mountains. And we know that if they've got snow on them, that means that they must be very, very tall and very close to the sky for them to have the snow and those cold temperatures. And then we need to look for the chain. What do we mean by a chain? So we know that a chain is a piece of metal that interlocks. Okay, so if we have a chain of snow-covered peaks, peaks is plural. So we're looking for a line or a chain of mountains that might be joined together. Okay, and the next sentence says that it is encircling. Okay, so what impression does this give you of the rim of heaven? So let's have a look at what we've written for our answer. Okay, so the suggestion of the snow means the peaks are very high into the sky. Now we know, certainly from looking at our mountains topic in geography, if we're looking at Mount Everest or we're looking at some of the peaks that we've got in Snowdon, it's quite difficult to get to the top of some of those mountains, especially mountains like Everest or Kilimanjaro. So we're thinking that mountains are going to be inaccessible to humans, which for the dragons is a good thing because it means they'll be safe and protected. Now this links onto the idea of a chain of mountains, which means they're very protective but also difficult to get to. So if you imagine a chain, it's very difficult to break a chain, and a chain is very strong and very solid. Okay, now because it's solid, it can be used to secure or to protect something. So it also gives a deeper meaning that this chain, this encirclement of the snow-covered peaks is almost like a protective barrier around the peaks. Okay, so around the valley. So this would suggest that the mountains around the valley are actually kept very safe and very hidden. Okay, so there's lots of different meanings that we can infer from there just from looking at the vocabulary and what we know from our background knowledge. So have a go at doing this question on your own. Okay, so there was a quote on one of the pages, beware, beware of the golden one. Why do you think the author has used the word beware? So you need to go back to the text, you need to find this in chapter 3. It'll be on one of the pages that we've looked at. And I want you to have a read around and think, why do you think the author has used the word beware? So pause the video and jot down what your answer might be. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at the word beware to start off with. Now, I know that beware, if I think about any warning signs that I come across if I'm driving somewhere or I'm looking at bottles that might have bleach or something in it, beware is a word that's associated with danger. So something to be wary of, something to be warned about that could have potential consequences. So by being beware of something, he's warning them he's sending a warning to them. So the use of the word beware is to suggest there's a warning. Now it says, beware of the golden one. Now, if I'm thinking about my grammar and punctuation skills, I'm looking at golden one and they both have capital letters. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what would I usually give capital letters to? So capital letters are usually going to be for proper nouns, so names of places or people. Now, if we're going to be sending a warning of something and they're going to a valley where there's lots of dragons, this could be an insinuation that there is a dragon there called the Golden One. It could even be a human called the Golden One. So clearly, something they're going to come across, or someone, be it a dragon, they're going to come across, might be dangerous. So there is a warning there to be wary of another dragon for whatever reason he might have. So when we see the word beware, we think of danger. Now, the author has used this word to send a warning to rat and fire drake that they may face some danger. So rather than saying there is a character called the Golden One, but he is very dangerous, that's up to them to infer meaning from that. Why would they need to be aware of them? So rather than telling them that there's going to be danger, he's almost inferring that understanding that there's going to be danger. Now, as I said, the Golden One is written in capital letters, so it could suggest that it's the name of the other dragon, so therefore a potentially dangerous one as well. So we're linking the word beware, so our knowledge of what it means to be beware of something, and the capital letters for the Golden One to infer the name of a dragon, as to the context of that very small sentence, that they may come face to face with a very dangerous dragon, something that they need to be aware of. Okay, so your task for this lesson is, I would like you to make sure that you are using the text to support you. So you have all the pages at home or at school in front of you to help you with the work. You need to have a go at answering all of the questions for chapter 3 that I have sent home in the document to you. Now, if it helps you, rewind the video to understand what the different types of questions might be asking you to do. But remember to use evidence in the text to support your answers and make sure you write in full sentences, okay? I haven't given you too many questions today because I know I gave you a lot of questions for your inference lesson the other day. So just have a go at answering those questions, but use the text and evidence to support you, okay? Good luck.